Martin, are you there? Hello.
Hi there.
So if you're all right with it, I'm going to record this,
Okay.
and hopefully we won't get any internet drops and all that.
Yeah.
That's always a challenge. So I'm going to move you off screen for now
Okay.
and share. Wrong button.
Oh.
Oh, sorry. I thought I'd started sharing already. Nope. Gotta click share. Can't just click the window.
Okay.
So are you able to see? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was trying to get the microphone. I don't need it, but I wanted to test these earphones. But
Okay. Well, if you want
Bluetooth
a
doesn't seem
minute.
to be. I can see the project, the MakeyMakey project architecture.
All right, good. So this, I think you know, but I'll just give you some of the background. This was a project in the spring 2020 xAPI cohort.
Yeah.
And part of the project was we did ongoing iterations and updates, and some of that video is out there on the GitHub. A lot of it is on YouTube, and I'm linking to my YouTube files as unpublished from the GitHub. So you sort of need to go there to get the links. And one of the challenges is we did a number of presentations. At the end of the project, there's a present out where each team presents for, I think it's 5 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
And then they also have what they call the xAPI party, which gives you an opportunity to present for 45 minutes.
Okay.
So we did both of those, and frankly found that it wasn't enough time to get into the behind the scenes architecture, which is what I think you'd be interested in. So this meeting with you has given me a chance to sort of capture that and to share it a little more detail.
Okay.
So the slides that I have up on the screen were initially created for those presentations, and the summary of project activities section, it was sort of a bonus area where we just went through slides really quickly, and this is sort of the detail that I wanted to share with you.
Okay. So you didn't get to go through these parts.
Not into this depth.
Okay.
We
Okay.
literally went page by page through the slides, but I'm actually going to show you where things are at in terms of what the screens look like. So over here on the right, I'm virtual machined into a MacBook that's downstairs.
Okay.
This was the MacBook I used for that project. Now I'm on a different machine, so I'm still running that local web server out there.
Okay.
So part of that architecture, maybe I should start with a faceplate of the app, is well, I thought live code was running. There it is. This sometimes gives me a rather strange reaction, but we'll see what it does here. So it looks like it's playing somewhat nice, but it's overlaid over everything else. So you're familiar with live code. So I'm not going to go through the palettes here or tools. I'm not going to get into details about too much of that, but the details on the stack information is here. And then I've got this add-in that for some reason wants to be in the middle of my screen. So we're just going to work through this right now.
Okay.
So this is actually
GLX2,
Go ahead.
GLX2.
Yes.
Yep.
So this is actually the app that we created.
Okay.
And down at the bottom is representation of the MakeyMakey board. And when the app is running, it'll load the web screen and the widget up at the top.
Okay.
And I can click on the icons here that I have buttons over the graphic. And then I also have this little extension board that I found that allows you, without getting into wiring on the back of the board, it allows you to just use the alligator clips again for additional letters. So this let us do some extensions of what that board looks like. And then the web page, and you can see I have buttons here for remote and local. So it switches between my remote server, which is duckworks.biz, and I'll share this in the chat so you can actually load the page. And then the local URL is literally pointing at this, and what I'm realizing is I can't load that right now because the URL is outdated. So the other machine is running this server, and if I come over here to my active tab, this is the actual page that's running. So if I do a reload, we should see some data scrolling back in the background that it's actually loading the pages.
Okay.
And there's a couple errors, there's no favorite icon and a few things like that, but it's showing you it's loading this index, CSS, JavaScript. So this is a JavaScript library called CryptoJS, a JavaScript library called xAPI wrapper.js. Part of that xAPI wrapper is this project JavaScript, the CSS, and the JavaScript for visualizer part that I added in. And then there's a PNG file that just adds spacing.
Okay.
So go ahead.
So is the JavaScript just is running on your server, or is live code somehow running the JavaScript command?
The JavaScript is on the web server at this point. So one of the stages that I'd like to get to is, like I mentioned in the web viewer over here, it is pointing to either a local server or a remote server. I understand there's a way to encapsulate that within the live code files, but I haven't learned that process yet. I'd like to be able to put the HTML, CSS, JavaScript within the live code file and only expose a few components of that as fields so people can add in the variables they need and run the app without connecting to either of these web servers. They'd be able to run the app local, and the browser widget can just serve those files.
Oh, I see. Yeah. No, I was wondering how the JavaScript, but yeah, if you could just then load the files in the browser,
yeah,
that would work.
So yeah, right now it's pointing either out to one of these two servers.
Yeah.
And the way this is working, it should cycle through. If I go back to the remote server, let me just make sure we're on the same URL. Visual index, I think I do have it loaded.
Yeah.
So if I hit the up arrow or the right arrow, let me click in the browser and see if I'm going to get a response. I'm not getting a response, unfortunately.
That's not the local one, though. That's
the remote one, but
yeah.
What it should do is tell me that it's received a response. So let me try my keyboard rather than clicking. And now that I remember, I'm reminding myself, the way the app is functioning, if I click something, it's a test. And it'll highlight, but it doesn't actually send the statement. If I use the keyboard or the MakeyMakey board, I can then get the feedback that I've selected the W key by clicking the blue button.
Yeah.
And what that's referring to is I have a box that we built. Let me go off screen for a moment and grab it. So we have this joystick box that we built.
Okay, yeah.
And this is the commercial version. We also had, because of the MakeyMakey is sort of a homemaker thing, we started off with this board.
Oh, well.
I know there's not much light. Let me add that to the mix. Sorry, I didn't get all my studio things fired up ahead of time the way I should have. So this allowed you to look at the question listed here and touch a response by touching one of these.
Okay.
The buttons are literally made of, they're falling away now, but the buttons are literally made of ping pong balls that are cut in half.
Oh.
So that is not holding up very well, you can see, which led us to look at, okay, how do we find something that's a little less homebrewed and a little more commercial. And so on Amazon and eBay, they have these kits that allow you to put together a joystick, and you can see there's some wires underneath in the MakeyMakey board. So if I plug this in and click one of the letters, I'm literally sending a response to the MakeyMakey board, and it will send this response out to the server through the live code. And you can see now we have an ID. So that tells us that we have actually sent a selected statement, an xAPI statement that indicates that something was selected. What was the question?
Oh, Zoom's gone full screen, so I couldn't see it. Okay, can you do that again?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Oh, sorry, I missed the. So you clicked the button on the
Right.
on the board, and then it actually just pops up selected.
Yep. Let's see if I can make the connections here. There will be a short delay while I unwrap all the USBs and plug it in.
Just spent a couple days. I got new shades for my office, but I had to move my desk, and the desk was all wires from the last 10 years. Every time I change it, they were all hanging down, so I rewired everything, so now it's...
Well, I'm actually in TV studio mode now, where I have a number of wires.
Yeah.
So part of this is, you can see the MakeyMakey board is lit, it is on, and unfortunately I have a few cables hanging, so there's likely to be some not shorts, but incomplete circuits.
Yeah.
But let's see what happens. Aside from the keyboard setup assistant showing up, I don't. I don't need to see it as a keyboard.
Yeah.
So there, I hit the red button. I'm seeing that I've selected the A key by clicking the red button, and once I click OK, it actually will revise what we're seeing on the screen.
Okay.
And that shows me that that has been sent. So I'm using a visualizer JavaScript library that I mentioned here, the visualizer and the CSS for that. Okay. And that reformats that JSON that has been sent and received back from the server, or the LRS, and allows me to sort of drill down and to see what the statement looks like. So here's the agent, the actor that we sent in. Here's the verb that we sent in with an ID for the verb selected. If I hit display, it tells me that that is selected. And because of the structure of the JSON, you're driving down into these items. But you can see that I answered that, I should say, our actor, Anna Johnson, has selected red for question 27 in response to this question.
Yeah.
And if I scroll down further, the correct responses pattern tells me that it should have been yellow.
Okay.
And the choices included 0 through 3, so 4 choices. Okay. And these showed me what are active within the statement that we're sending. And then the activity detail allows me to see that they completed the activity. The success level was set to false because they didn't match the answer and the correct answer. And then the context here adds us some additional details. So we added in a category, a parent. So the category includes the object type of activity. Excuse me. Yeah. Both the category and the parent. And then the definition has these additional attributes: an assessment and our formative assessment. We identify the instructor, so we're adding quite a bit of context to the JSON that's being sent back to the LRS. So part of that is saying our team is Team MakeyMakey, and we're identifying the platform as the question response app. And this overall ID is the statement ID that the LRS has sent back. So when we send a statement, the LRS answers back by adding that ID, and that can be used for the query. And in the sense, we're sort of set up to do those queries now within our HTML. We've pulled that data back in and are displaying it. But we didn't really enable that within the time frame of the team. And so the architecture is, we're either going to this local web server or we're going out to the remote web server that I've been showing you.
Yeah.
And on the local one, the advantage to having this visible is I can go into mission control, switch desktops, and see the structure that we're looking at. So the web folder on this other laptop is showing that within MakeyMakey, we are looking at the path of xAPI, MakeyMakey visual. Check that. I need to go to the local side and show you that path. So within the local URL, we're looking at just MakeyMakey/visual and the index file. So this is the folder we're using, is visual. We right click on that and open a new tab. We're using the index file, which then pulls in the JavaScript and CSS.
Okay.
And if you like, we can actually get into the details. Let me just use mission control again here. So do you have a question?
Yeah. So just some questions about how live code is working in this. So first off, you were saying right now, if you click the buttons, you can't really generate the statement because it's not actually sending it to the keyboard or sending it to whatever, right?
Right.
But I think you can do that in live code.
You can.
You could send a key down.
It's just not enabled in the sense that part of the process of our going through multiple stages in the app, maybe I need to expand on that a little bit down here. I think the simplest way for me to do that quickly is to talk through that we build multiple iterations. And our first sprint, we built this bottom part of the app.
Okay.
And we said, okay, what problems do an instructor have? Well, one of the challenges for them is when they plug in this board, they need a way to make sure it's working. Okay. And so we built the first iteration of the app to say, can I test this visually on the screen? By clicking each of these, I can see that I'm getting interaction on my screen. But then if they actually touch the connections on the MakeyMakey board, they'd be able to test that and make sure that touching the various alligator clips from ground over here to the different points would actually cause an interaction. And unfortunately, there it went. Let's see if I can get that light to hit while you can see it. There we go. So my personal conductivity is a little challenged because I'm diabetic. But you can see I'm switching back and forth on the MakeyMakey. And that is actually a way to test that the system is working within the smallest confines, that they're getting a signal between the computer and the MakeyMakey board. Okay. And so I said we were testing it quite a lot that way. I said, rather than send a statement every time I do that, I want to just capture that locally and give feedback. So within the realm of testing the board, we didn't enable that within live code. It is quite possible and quite easily done. So what we're doing is trapping within the live code that signal is being sent and just making a display change rather than actually sending the statement.
Okay. And then for live code, you're not sending it using like post URL or get URL or anything like that in live code.
No, at this point we are sending everything by updating the browser URL.
Okay.
So you can see the card script here. We're literally looking at, if I'm clicking at this point, we're literally looking at, the key down is from the keypad. the keyboard, I should say, which the MakeyMakey is emulating.
Yeah.
So this code is whether or not the MakeyMakey or my keyboard has sent a space or the individual letters that you're seeing here. It's testing for each of these letters. And then we're passing that key down to make sure anything else connected should be able to see it. And you can see we're just changing the highlight at that point.
And then you've got arrow keys.
And then the arrow keys are handled separately.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of complexity to the live code part at this point. But part of that was to show, part of the design of approaching it this way, most people within the cohort aren't really aware of what live code is and how it works and what it can do for you. So we wanted to build that awareness, and part of it was to make the card script fairly simple to digest and understand. You can see the mouse up again as another handler.
Yeah.
And then if I need to click back over here, I have to remind myself. And then I want to look at the stack script. So the stack script is more functions around handling the browser widget and actually sending the statements.
Okay.
And I need to page up. It's not going very fast for me here. So I've got a few local variables. The code that I borrowed from livecode.com had basically the browser widget being instantiated from the code on create browser. But I ran into some issues there, so you can see I've commented most of this out, but part of what I needed to do was set the JavaScript handlers so I can actually build the interaction between the browser widget and the JavaScript that is loaded within it. And on browser refresh, I'm using that for remote and local.
Okay.
So create browser is looking at remote, and then if I click the local, they're actually seeing the browser refresh happen. And part of that was the live code project that I used had them load a URL and then be able to refresh it. And I said, well, I can use that for local and my server. And the reason for that was with me testing as I'm building the live code, it was really convenient for me to have it local. You can see I can edit the files within BBEdit and go through that cycle very quickly. But once I shared it, nobody else was seeing anything. So I realized, well, wait a minute, I'm looking at my local server. Unless they set one on the same IP address, and they have, I set one up remotely on my commercial server called duckworks.biz.
Yeah.
And you can see we've got some code here from the example that really isn't live or used. The hide example, show examples. But the set URL we're launching the URL of a variable called tfile in a widget web URL browser, and that is the name of the widget we see over here. So if I switch through that, you'll see web URL browser.
Yeah.
I haven't verbalized it, but it's fine to type.
Okay. You've got, about your code, you've got set URL and then PURL and then tfile. So tfile is a script local?
Yes.
Like you don't use a parameter. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you're seeing I have some limitations in my live code knowledge. So no, I'm not using parameters, and I believe that's what I need to expand to start embedding that HTML and the other files within the stack, is having parameters and read in that text within the parameters.
Okay. No, I was just wondering how it was working.
And then again, they had some resize stacks script. We're not really using that. I've set this up to be, somewhat small on like a laptop size. Yeah. And now that we're looking at it on the larger desktop, you can see it's a busy screen, but there's a lot to sort of digest. Yeah.
No, I was just asking the different questions, but I understand. So it's more of a prototyping.
Yes.
So that people can actually just see the process and, like you said, troubleshoot if the button click actually working, and then visualize the JavaScript so they can learn how the JavaScript or the JSON objects actually look.
Right. Right.
Which I think is neat. Which I was thinking you had a way to do that in live code, but it does the job nicely. That it just and it's one.
Yeah, this literally was, I mean, like I said, we did a number of iterations. So we literally started off with our minimum viable product and said, what do we need to do to get the MakeyMakey board working? Okay, now let's add in a web URL browser widget, and you know, each step sort of progressed a little further. Yeah. So the earliest version, like I said, is only the MakeyMakey board.
Yeah.
And then we had another version where I did separately the URL browser and talked to the files on the servers, and was able to take data from the MakeyMakey or the keyboard without showing them the feedback that we have on the bottom of this version. And what that let us do was say, okay, you now have the ability within a live code project talking to a web server to send a statement without even it being a MakeyMakey specific project. Yeah. So the idea was we built these iterations, and each one of them can now sort of be brought forward. And where I'm at now is I want to update the comprehensive project. I'll call this last version that, as well as sort of bringing that learning record provider, I call it, which is the web URL browser only version to send a statement, up to a more recent view where we embed those files. And that would allow someone either downloading the live code project or someone downloading the app from the GitHub to sort of get up and running fairly quickly without the dependencies on a web server. Without them having to run their own web server or have access to one where they're uploading files. Because again, that within the cohort time frame, if they're not doing that locally or capable of doing the FTP or the other file upload process themselves, it builds constraints within the team. They're having to add a team member who's managing those files and managing the web server. And I'm finding that a lot of the people who are ready to approach xAPI may not have that background. Some of us do, but a lot of them don't.
Yeah, and I'm coming from not really having much, like, sort of general gist of xAPI, and I've been learning more since we've been in the project.
Right.
So for me, it's more, how does this fit into the whole xAPI things, and what is it? What part is doing what? So when it sets the URL is the statement, or the URL is or the URL generates the statement.
Well, let's look at that a little bit, because you're prompting me exactly where I wanted to go. So what we've done is I've gone back to my local server. Yeah. You can see in the background I have that structure we were talking about. The visual folder has the index file, has a JavaScript folder underneath it. The crypto JavaScript library is there. The project JavaScript is there, and the xAPI wrapper is JavaScript library is there. So the xAPI wrapper comes as this project file, and you can see I've made a few copies and made some changes. But what I've added to it is the visualizer piece, and that gives us the ability to walk through that JSON structure. Okay. But it's not required, and it's not part of the xAPI wrapper. So I want to focus in on what does it take to send a statement.
Okay.
Within the xAPI wrapper, we are using the project file and the CSS files that are up here, project CSS, and again, the visualizer sort of touches back to that piece we don't want to look at right now. So if I switch over and view the index.html file, this header structure is where we pull in our scripting. So we have a reference to, I want to just see if I'm missing anything. So here's the first reference to our CSS. So we're pulling in project CSS, which is what formats it on the screen.
Yeah.
And excuse me while I clean up a little bit here.
Okay.
So I want to close up some of the live code screens, and this will give us the ability to view the page at the same time.
Yeah.
So again, we're viewing this index.html file, which is the file we're seeing down here. And the libraries are called at this point just to include them. So the code that we see further down will be able to execute that. And then our script further down here, we're talking to Cloudflare, which has some Ajax libraries that are being used. So jQuery, JSON to HTML, and a jQuery again. And then the visualizer script. So if I scroll down a little bit here, we'll go into the body, which shows us what is published as text on the page that we're viewing on the server. Okay. And you can see this section here. I'm in a different folder. I apologize. So I'm in this challenge folder, and I'm seeing different code. I apologize for that. So I realized partway through the setup that I needed to be looking at visual, and I had opened other things.
Okay.
So let me see if I can jump to that quickly here. I don't want visualizer, I want project. I don't know that we need to go in the CSS, but if we do, we can do that. I'm going to open with BBEdit. And there we see our structure again. So back to the HTML file. We should see similar headers than what we saw before. So I'm down here to this body section. And now we should see the correlation with what you're seeing here.
Okay.
These progress reports and the header text. So all of that is static text. I've got some links in there to allow people, once they get access to one of these pages or the app, when they're running the app, you can actually scroll back up in here and use the links.
Okay.
So if I clicked on the cohort, you can click on the GitHub. It's going to take a moment to load, so I'm going to continue on while it does that. But that's part of why I have these remote and local buttons, is as that loads and shows you the other pages, you can use the remote and local button to return back to the server side. So yeah, you can see it's loading rather slowly. My internet connection is challenged. The other key pieces you see here is ready is what is shown as output within this page when it initially loads. So let me do a reload. You can see our ID is no longer available. So down here we have ready as status within the actor. So I'm literally sending that manually to let the JSON structure be built, but it's just to show that the page is ready and you can send the statement.
Okay.
And let me bounce back over. So I clicked that link. This took us to the MakeyMakey wiki.
Yeah.
So the idea is someone who has access to the app can then see where the source files are. So there's quite a bit of detail that I've added out there. I'm going to click remote to get that back off the screen to catch us up with where we're at here.
Yeah.
Switching back. So now we get into the case statements that allow us to look at what the MakeyMakey board or keyboard is sending. And again, all we're doing within the JavaScript for the HTML is saying, did I hit the space bar? Did I hit the left arrow? Have I selected the up arrow, the right arrow, the down? Or have I selected a letter? And then each of these letters correspond basically with an ASCII character. So the logic within the JavaScript is, if you see case 87, I selected the W, and I need to use JavaScript to tell one of the JavaScript libraries we're using that the W was selected. So as we switch back into the project file, we'll see what happens when each of these is selected. And because of the file structure, there's a little bit of abstraction there.
So are these just ASCII numbers?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is literally looking for ASCII. And part of what we saw within the live code is there's different structures for if it's an arrow key or if it's a mouse down or the other keys that can be clicked.
Yeah.
If I look over here on the interface, these are the other keys that can be clicked. I can also capture on the MakeyMakey whether the mouse is clicked, the space bar is pushed or clicked, or if they use the arrow keys. So within live code, the structure is different for each of these types of interactions. But within JavaScript, we're just trapping for the ASCII characters. So you can see it's one long switch statement that looks at different cases of which was pushed.
Yeah, and you could do something like if you wanted to do it so that when you typed on the keyboard focused on the MakeyMakey, if it's a different, you could just have like a switch statement.
Right.
So if it's on spacebar or on however it, key down
okay.
A, and then it would just, you would just have just like you had a parallel one for the key down and the switch statement,
right,
or the arrow keys.
Mm-hmm.
If there were like in a switch statement, say there's two things that really would trigger the same action. Like for example, on a wide keyboard, like a one with a number pad,
full size, yes.
That's what that's called. The number keys on that are different. Are there arrow keys? I don't know. I have one.
I do have one.
Anyways,
I'm not sure I can show it.
There's some keys that aren't the same and they generate a different key code.
Yeah.
But I think it's the numbers that are different, and it doesn't. But anyways, you could have both of those cases before the break, and either one, and so either one would trigger it, right?
Right.
So you could have something that would, if that's what you were going for. But I was going to ask something. So do you have to be focused on by focused I mean like clicked on the browser and then click the keys to have that happen if you're using the keyboard? Or is it?
It's the app. The application has to be focused, but I haven't clicked on either of the browser, so I'm not sure how to capture whether I'm active here. I mean, you saw the click, but you can see this still will scroll, so I'm not entirely clear on what my state is when I just click into the app or out of it.
Yeah.
But I still should be able to send the red. We are running, and you can see it's gathering the input and it's preparing the response because my cursor is spinning.
Oh, the A now went. The A's pressed.
Yeah, I see that. Okay.
Yeah.
So now I get the feedback saying I've selected the A key by clicking the red button.
Yeah.
And then once I click OK again, you saw the scroll bar slightly change. I wasn't scrolled down to see the ID. Yeah. Well, now if I switch to the web page, you can see the web page itself isn't updated because it's another instance within a different browser.
Yeah.
So if I perform a different action here, it's appearing, well, maybe my wiring for green may not be active, so let's try a couple of them trying to see if I can get a different response, but I'm not successful.
Yeah. But I'm just wondering if you click right on click in the text of the browser. Oh, you're still you've got the S key.
Yeah. So I got the S key.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it connected very well, but so that's going to let this browser update.
Okay.
Huh. Oh, I did get a few of them.
Yeah.
it took a moment for them to register, so there's some latency there.
Yeah.
And they queued up, so
Yeah.
At that point, that's one of the things we ran into, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but if I remember right, I need to display object, and I've clicked the other ones.
So my question is, if you just click on, like, just click in a anywhere that's in white, like a white space on there, on your browser, and then just hit the A key on your keyboard.
Okay. So we can see that I clicked green, so I'm going to click A.
Okay, so the JavaScript picks up any keystrokes on the page itself, right?
Right.
And the same should be true on the live code. If you click on some white space in the live code browser window, so you're focused on that, and then push the A key.
It's getting the input.
So the object, where does it show the input on that one? Is it the object?
Yes, object. I think definition.
Name or description?
No. Yes.
Okay.
So saw that as the red button. But I don't know why we didn't get JavaScript. We should have seen a JavaScript confirmation there.
Okay. So to get, if you want like on live code, I don't know if the browser, when it gets that keystroke, does it pass it down to the next, like to the stack or the card. But if you focused on some other button, or like if you made this a group, the MakeyMakey representation of the MakeyMakey board, if you made that a group and was like clicking on anything, you focused on that, and then you hit the A, then that A will go through that group.
Right. Okay.
So then you could use that as a way to send off, like, then call that sort of the same sort of, basically almost the same script as is in your JavaScript, and just go down through and look at what key was pressed or whatever. If you wanted to be able to show the parts of it by actually clicking on the MakeyMakey board itself. Like that would then send the message back.
Then it would capture.
Then you would just put that into your same, send that to the same thing that makes the URL.
Right.
And then would post the statement. So you could do it either by pushing the board, clicking on the, which is basically a prototype thing. I don't know if that's what you're aiming at or not, but
yeah, we could enable that. Actually, I think what I might consider is adding a switch that says, do mouse clicks, send statements, kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And that way we could let them differentiate it, because one of the challenges, we've added so much complexity that I'm starting to see ways to granulize it. And actually, one of the things that occurs to me is when we get into where this script is executing. Should I go there now?
Sure.
So the index file connects it to the project.js file. So what we're capturing here is actually sending, I believe I should say, activating these functions. I think that's the right terminology, within the project.js file. Yeah. So for select down arrow, let's leave that one selected and go into the JavaScript. Unfortunately, it scrolled down to where I had been. But you can see it's broken up into functions: select up arrow,
Yeah.
select right arrow. And what I've done is manually defined what
Okay.
that
Yeah.
JSON looks like for the statement, and then edited the variances. So right now, none of that is coming from variables. None of that is
Okay.
being
I see.
filled by
Yeah.
values in a field.
Yeah.
But that's part of what I'm looking at is, instead of just assuming we know who the agent is and assuming we know the background, if we expose some text fields
Yeah.
in the live code, I'd want to be able to fill in that name, mailbox information into a
Yeah.
variable. Actually, it is coming into a variable. The variables are set up here,
Yeah.
but I'd like to be able to replace that with values from the field rather
Yeah.
than the variable values.
Yeah.
So that's part of my thinking now.
Yeah. And you could make an array, like have the variables, and like you would have, put your actor name, put your, the verb would be the same. Like the verb would be the same because it's based on what you just did,
Right.
right?
Right.
And all of
So the other key thing to
things
know,
would be standard. Yeah.
the other key thing to know is when we hit this function, when I've selected the up arrow and it's gone through the HTML, it's being sent here and triggering this. It's setting a variable called up arrow statement
Yeah.
and filling it with these values, and some of the values themselves are coming from variables.
Yeah.
But the remainder of that up arrow statement is then being sent. I shouldn't say remainder, but the comprehensive value is being sent to the xAPI wrapper through the send statement. So
Yeah.
this is the JavaScript that's actually triggering a statement to be sent by going out to that library. So it's going out to the xAPI wrapper.javascript to
Yeah.
perform that function.
Yeah.
So that's the next stage. And then the rest of this file is just case statements. In a sense, we're looking at each function and
Yeah.
determining what the values are. So in order to rapid prototype this, again, all our JSON has been replicated for each function,
Yeah.
rather than having values that are coming from variables based on the dependencies.
Yeah.
And then like I said, I've replicated that, but you can see some of these certain ones are getting longer and better values. So we added context into the details for the W selection, for example. I've added in, and this is what we were viewing down here, I've
Yeah.
added in the actor details with a mailbox,
Mhm.
the agent name, the actor name, I should say, and object type is agent. So this is where that's coming from.
Mhm.
The verb is selected, the ID is selected, and then the object has some variance in it between the different answers, but for the most part, the actor and verb is replicated. But based on the object, we're actually defining that this is where the color comes from. So
Okay.
select W equates to blue, and question 27 is static based on that ping pong ball board I showed and the question
Yeah.
number that's answered. So at this point, we're answering one question. So all the JSON in here is replicated with question 27
Yeah.
and
You
correct
could add a
response is
variable in
yellow.
there. You
Right,
could do it as a variable, so you could have it as they turn pages,
right. And
And
then,
or something like that, or
yes, exactly.
something comes up on the screen.
Again,
And,
another array with multiple question and responses. So for question 26, it would have different choices
Yeah.
than question 27. Question
Yeah.
28 again would be different. So yeah, these could be pulled in from that array, and then the values could be added in there. But again, we've got them in as static text for now,
Yeah.
and also defining it as an activity. So some of the next level would be to abstract those again out as variables and work with arrays.
Yeah. Yeah. And you
You
could
can see that.
have it set that so you open up like so you would the MakeyMakey board would be in conjunction with some other. It's a way to interact with some other activity.
Right.
So
right.
say if a kid can't find the A key or the W key or the whatever key.
Yeah.
But they're using this, so you'd have go to a web page or a module, and I'm not sure how all those modules work in that. But then as you go to the next page, somehow that you'd have to. Well, actually, you'd have to if you had, which I don't see if you could do that, but like a next button or whatever.
Yeah, we didn't add that into the interface, but
What?
part of it was part of the premise, and I sort of glazed over this, was our group decided as a group, as a team, that we were focused on one interaction within the scope of, we have an audience that is children or adults with disabilities who don't have the motor function to work a keyboard.
Yeah.
So they may be able to interact with the joystick and the button group that we have here, or to interact with the ping pong ball board that I showed earlier. And that
I see the up, left, right is the joystick.
Right. And that would allow them to work, say, at a single station where they have one interaction. So the idea is they've gone through other interactions. At this station, they're interacting with this environment, answering this one question.
Yeah.
So we didn't build in the navigation of paging from activity to activity. They'd have that set up at a like workstation or environment where they're working on different things.
Yeah, but what I'm talking about is just within. You've got question 26.
Right,
How do you
1
to 26? But you've got the left and right, but on the joystick, so they could just do right. That updates the question number, and then pull from the array your values to punch into your statement, and then you go right. And if you let them go back, you let the left key go on if they needed to go back and review or things like that, right?
Yep.
So you could have some of the navigation just using your joystick.
That's true.
The other buttons could do the answers, and it could give some other instructions like press the space bar, click the mouse or whatever.
We also talked about them using up and down to navigate between a submitted answer and revisiting the answer.
Okay, yeah.
Part of the xAPI spec is that you don't edit once something is submitted to an LRS.
Yeah.
You are the system actually needs to send a statement that says, I think it's called revoking a previous answer.
Okay. Yeah,
so it uses the ID that's on the screen here and says, okay, that statement has now been revoked. Let's send another statement that is a corrected answer.
Yeah.
And in reporting, you actually would, when you queried the LRS, you would actually get all three answers and have to recognize that this certain ID number 136ED has been answered, has been revoked, and we need to look at AA509 for the correct answer, or for the submitted answer, and evaluate whether or not it's correct.
Yeah. And the other thing I was thinking is you could add a timestamp into your statement.
Right.
So that each part. Oh, is it in there? Oh,
that is actually provided by. I'm gonna have to dig to find it. Actually, let me dig over here. That is actually provided by the platform, by the LRS.
Okay.
So it's part of the response, but you can see, I'm expanding beyond my screen here. The other thing I want to do is build in a JavaScript that says expand all. I don't have that.
Yeah.
But you can see once you start looking at all this detail, there should be a timestamp in here, and I'm not current on exactly where it would be buried.
Yeah.
So account instructor. Activity. Object type. It's not part of the choices. I'm not finding it, but
Yeah.
as I understand, it was added as the ID is. But I don't. Maybe I don't have it visualized. That's a good question. So I haven't really, broken into that, but another tab open would be to look at StormCloud and to show you the data that's actually being stored out there, and that there it would be visible. I'm certain. I'm confident.
Yeah, and you could do things to make sure it wasn't sort of accidentally submitted. So you have like a confirmation. So up is submit, and then it'll say, "Are you sure that's the answer?"
Yeah.
If yes, submit again.
Yep. So I'm looking. I didn't see that over there, but the other thing, I mean, if I scroll down here, you're going to see that it's pretty much replicated through all those, all the case statements that we have here. The project.js file is all this JSON, and it sort of builds based on how much context we added. It builds into quite a lengthy document.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, within BB Edit, I can go through and say, okay, that function I want to minimize, this function I want to, and I can start to summarize it and just see which one do I want to look at.
Yeah. So right now the statement is just basically what you've hard coded with a couple variables, right?
Right.
And in your statement, it doesn't have a timestamp.
No.
But what you're saying is when the statement is sent, or that statement is sent within its database, it
on the LRS end,
the LRS creates it.
It is adding a timestamp, but it also, I'm also sort of unclear between the response that we get from sending the statement, which I know adds this ID in at the bottom.
Yeah.
So that is our statement ID, but I'm believing that it also responds with a timestamp. It may not. It may just be entered in on the LRS side, and you have to do the query to get that back. We're not doing that query, so what we're displaying here in the JavaScript visualizer, JSON visualizer, is the response that the response that the browser received after sending the statement.
Yeah.
Which is different than querying the LRS.
Yeah, and they may not be pulling out this timestamp and putting it down. It just might be the visualizer isn't giving you that information.
Right.
My battery's running low. I gotta find my plug.
Okay.
Oh, just a second. It's right here. Oh.
Wow.
There. No, this is helpful just to get both sort of how you're using it.
Yeah, I thought this would be helpful for
what your goal is, but the other is just to understand the JavaScript itself. Like I can understand sort of some JavaScript to like change fonts and change colors and little one-liners in web pages. But this is helping to understand how it ties in.
Yep.
And how the libraries are loaded and how
they're all referred within the structure.
Yeah.
So part of what I did here is I took us back into the index file, and we're looking at the select A, which is being evaluated based on the key code within JavaScript. So if I go into the project file that we were just at, I'm at that select A statement, and it is saying if that's what someone selected, if that's the message received, I'm going to set the variable to this JSON, and that is what is going to be then summarized and sent. It is within the function, my apologies. Summarized and sent to the LRS.
Yeah.
Sorry, BB edit is not responding. There it is. So here is the statement where it is being sent to the LRS for the select A function. And you can see that it sets a variable within a statement, or which is really the alpha character statement.
Yeah.
And then it's sending with that variable. So if I come out, the next level of abstraction is the xAPI wrapper JavaScript. Again, this is the JSON library that the ADL is providing. And now I can go through and see, okay, where is all that? Well, some of what we see right at the beginning is that we're using crypto to encrypt to base 64 the strings that we're sending, so we're not sending visible, we're not sending alpha text that's visible to the world. So that's part of the security side of things. But if I scroll down here, we're starting to see some of the other functions that they have. So there's isAdate, ADL. There's a number of things within this library. So the other thing I need to point out, this config section that begins at 106, this is actually one of the first things you need to edit. So when you sign up for an account within StormCloud or the other LRSs, I'm blanking on the name, Watershed and some of the other ones, what they do when you set up an account is they give you a key value, a secret value, and what is a public endpoint. And the public endpoint you can see here for StormCloud is this LRS / an ID name.
Okay. And
So
is that
part-
your ID?
That is part of that is my ID for a public project within the API cohort. So it's not something I'm using for proprietary use.
Yeah.
It is, it's a known account that I understand the keys, the secret keys are actually available as part of this code. So part of it is you want to set something up for this account, for the cohort, because you know that at some level that data may become corrupted or available to others. Yeah. And the key and the secret are what authenticates me to that endpoint. And when I say me, I'm really referring to this application using my account.
Yeah.
But like I said, to set up the xAPI wrapper JavaScript library, you go in and edit this file with your variables. And I sort of touched on it earlier. We're using, again, in the header up here, we're saying we're using Brian Duck StormCloud account. That keys to what variables we're seeing here. In earlier versions, we had an account for Joanne, which worked out great because she had already set it up. But what we ran into was one of the team meetings. We were going through this process, and I wanted to show people what was being submitted. I couldn't do it because she wasn't on the line and she had to log in.
Oh, yeah.
So my login credentials for StormCloud are different than what you see there. These credentials are just for submitting data to the LRS as a statement.
Yeah.
So the view credentials are different, and part of that means you sort of have to manage that. Either you share them as a team, or you say, I'm going to set one up and display it to everybody that's on the team. And then further down, we should be able to find some more details about that function. Rather than scroll through it, let's see if I can find this. So a statement is a variable, but if I go into xAPI wrapper and do a find, I should be able to find the rest of that. And you can see it's grayed out, so this isn't active, but it's saying the response object is going to be that send statement with a statement. So within the xAPI wrapper, they're using a different variable name, which is fine.
Yeah.
And then here's a prototype version. I'd have to go into the documentation on the xAPI wrapper to understand how this prototype send statement is different than what we're using.
Yeah.
ended. Okay, so let's say wrap around. I'm going to find the first one now. You saw the little icon showed up, so BBEdit is saying we just went to the first one.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely certain how that's working because
I think it must be
it's
that
coming
that's
it
the
out.
statement, but then it uses. I don't know understand JavaScript, but within the function it has the statement variable, so it must use that later. Like takes statement variable, so it prepares the statement.
Yeah, that must be it, and then it
Passes,
sends it.
and then it starts populating it with other, like with the there it has the ID.
Yeah.
Payload.
So that is likely generating that ID that's being returned back down here within the library. So it's actually being generated locally. I just didn't realize it. I thought that was coming back from the LRS, but you're helping me digest that. That is telling me that the JavaScript library is building that before it sends it.
Yeah, because then go more up the payload and then the.
I think you mean this?
You scroll up, yeah. And then you post the payload.
Right.
With the ID and headers and credentials and the parameter for callbacks and whatever.
So you were asking if live code was, accessing the URL functions and sending this. Basically, I would have had to replicate all this xAPI wrapper functionality within live code to do that.
Yeah.
So I said, well, let's just use the libraries that have been provided.
Yeah, and you could use this to figure out how to do it in live code. But it wouldn't be that hard to get. You'd use a post URL command, and you would build that thing that's in your statement plus. And the thing about ADL.RUUID, so that's a universal ID. So that means it's pretty well impossible to create two of them the same.
Oh, okay.
Mathematically, so it's so you don't have collisions of your ID numbers.
Right.
So you can always just keep posting IDs and never have to worry about having two the same. So within the ADL library, there's this thing that just gives you an ID, and then it uses that to post it up. So there was something about a callback, so I don't know what the callback is to this.
Yeah.
But I don't know. See, I don't understand quite how it works. I saw something at the top of the statement that said callbacks.
Yep. I'd have to look that up in a JavaScript
if
reference.
Callback. Yes. Oh, there it is. If callback, return the response and the ID. So so it returns the ID, which I assume is the same. Like it would be.
Yeah, I assume it's coming back with the same ID they've submitted.
Yeah.
Which.
Seems to be an extra.
I mean, I might be able to look at some of these variables to see if that timestamp is in there.
Yeah, it's if there's no callback. So the callback is probably an error.
Yeah.
Right? So if there's no callback, then post return the response back up to whatever called this xAPI, whatever you called your statement, it posts that response, and then that response is visualized. Probably what happens.
Right.
It gets passed into visualizer. Again, this is I really basically only know live code, but just using the process that it would use, this is what I assume this would be doing.
Yeah. Well, you're digesting a little better than I can, so I appreciate your guidance on it.
Yeah, the exclamation point ahead of callback is not.
Is not, right.
Yeah. and then it says return this value. So then you go back to your original statement and then see what it says something statement equals something, so it assigns it to something else, and then that probably goes to the visualizer. Okay, I probably should be getting going. We've been time for lunch.
Yeah, we went on a little longer than I thought, but I'm feeling like we got through everything I wanted to show you.
Yeah.
The only thing that I didn't with, and I imagine you're seeing that elsewhere, is what the LRS looks like and what statements are showing up in there.
Yeah.
I can also, I can share with you the links to the GitHub and that information.
Sure.
If you'd rather, I can put those in Slack rather than putting them into the chat here and having them be lost once we finish the session.
Yeah, just like if it's something public or whatever, put it there, or do a private message. Or so, are you planning to continue on with this, or is it like to add more to this?
I am.
Live code wise, or
it doesn't seem like, other than your interest, it doesn't seem like there was really a big interest and a lot of action around it. Joanne had worked with me earlier, and she said that they want to use the early childhood education project with the MakeyMakey board, so they need to figure out how to connect the two.
Okay.
And then I'm actually working with Team Adaptive Learning and Team Zoom, and Team Adaptive Learning has sort of started off with a WordPress site, and they're looking at the code behind the web and the JavaScript libraries to see if they can adapt what we have up and running and use and connect to connect to the JavaScript library to send the statements in a similar fashion. So there's some, it's good to see there's some reuse of it. But like I mentioned, for someone to get up and running with the live code without a lot of support and direction at this point, I need to take it at least one more step, and I think I want to say integrate or incorporate the HTML, JavaScript, and CSS that we've looked at up here in BB Edit as properties for the browser widget. I think that's how it's expressed. But it sounds like that's not something you've done or been exposed to.
I haven't used browser widget a lot.
Okay.
And I can read HTML. I can change it. Like I sort of learn by reverse engineering.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I can sort of fiddle around until I break it, and then I fix it.
That's pretty much where I'm at. I mentioned it already when we looked at the live code behind this for the card and the stack scripts. The logic that I used for the MakeyMakey, it was pretty much the only part I started from scratch. So when we looked at the card script, if I recall correctly, I have some things commented out, but some of it came from other locations, and then the others I just referred to the dictionaries, live code dictionaries.
Yeah. So you could do for example, on mouse up, and it's a card.
Yeah.
You could just ask what the target was. And so if the target is click, or a short name of the target. If the target is click, then, switch. Switch target, right? So the target will report back whatever the mouse clicks on. But you do short name of the target. And so you could use one statement that handles all the different mouse clicks there.
Okay. But if I understand this correctly, wouldn't that be limited to, let me drag off there. Wouldn't that be limited to what I've clicked on with the mouse versus what I've sent through the keyboard or the MakeyMakey?
Yeah, it would be just a way to, if someone and maybe I'm totally misunderstanding, but I kind of see the fact that you can click them. You want this to be able to interact and send the same statement that clicking on, like doing the MakeyMakey would. So if you didn't have the MakeyMakey hooked up, you could be sending statements that would be equivalent. So you could, just like you said, if you weren't hooked up with the, and like if you weren't hooked up to external browser or an external LRS,
Right.
you could at least see what statements using an internal server.
Okay.
Right? So you run the JavaScript so you could see it. The next stage would be parsing the Java, making the statement, and then visualizing it in live code. So using the same sort of thing, and someone's got a library that just makes a tree. And so if you built and I think they can take an array and you just put the array into the tree, and then it just shows the tree. And so you would make your array just like you have here, right? Like a multiple level array. Yep. And put what the verb is, and JSON / verb quote whatever, and just keep populating that. And then instead of using, you could have like tabs, and one would be the actual visualizer if you were online and using JavaScript. The other would be just visualizing what it actually looks like before. And you could even put I don't know how that tree thing works. I've fiddled around with it, but I'm just imagining it should work that way.
Yeah.
If you could edit parts of it, then you could actually, I just want to try and change this value, even after I've clicked it.
Yep.
So if you want, at some point, I could give that a shot. And
yeah, if you have a reference for that, I'd like to take a look at it, see if we can get that started.
Yeah, just to sort of add a few other live code.
Yeah. So part of what I'm thinking is, and you already touched on that, is having the different segments, having a tab interface up at the top, and starting off with the MakeyMakey, and maybe having at the far right preferences or something like that, where they put in the LRS information, and those become variables, like we mentioned earlier, having fields rather than them having to go in and edit JavaScript, I think would be key. And then we could have the visualizer as a tab, the MakeyMakey as a tab.
Yeah. And the nice thing is, live code has an array to JSON command.
Okay.
And JSON to array, so you could take a JSON statement and switch it into array, or vice versa. So if you had your array built and it was being updated as you change this, then you would just call JSON to array to JSON, and you would have your JSON statement, which you could then post to your
LRS.
To the LRS.
Yeah.
Yes, so still learning all the terms.
Yeah. But I understand. I'm still struggling, and part of what I've done is talk about this app as a learning resource provider, or I should say a learning record provider.
Yeah.
Because we're sending statements.
Yeah.
And some of the comments that Team Adaptive Learning had was the sending statements is sort of the crawling part. And yeah, I've been focused on it quite a bit. This was pretty much the capstone. What I've shown you is pretty much the capstone of the spring cohort for Team MakeyMakey.
Yeah.
But the challenge now is, okay, what do you do with the data once you've got it? How do you report on it? And so, we talked about the tab interface. I also want to be able to say, okay, who has, pull back a report from the LRS of records that have been sent and say, who's reported, what have they done, try and structure it as that. And from what I understand, querying the LRS gets into a number of challenges. One of them being, if you don't limit your request by either an ID or some other limiter, you will get everything the LRS knows within that account. You know, so all dates, all people.
Oh, I see.
But the other challenge is it will be page streamed. I think you'll get the first 100 records by default. So somehow the logic in the query has to be, how do we determine if there's more than 100 records? Yeah. And then you have to break that down and say, well, is it 5? Is it 500? Is it 1,000? How many times do we need to cycle through and build that into a repeat loop and say, give me the first 100, give me the next 100, give me the last 100. And then you have to digest them before, like you're saying, you have to build that array manually, upon multiple cycles of query and response, and then update your display.
Yeah, if the stuff is coming down as JSON, you just turn it into an array, and then you just append to the array somehow. That part I don't know, but I'm sure you just create, array 1, array 2, array 3, and then you just add one to the next somehow.
Yeah.
That part I don't know.
So
or don't know how you do it. But yeah, I could. The live code project is up somewhere.
Yep.
The live code file itself. I always have problem with GitHub figuring out where the actual file I want to download is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If you have another minute.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can show that to you. I have it open? I sure do. Okay, so the URL I clicked is here, the GitHub.
Yeah.
It's trying to load back there, but I'm going to close that because I already have it open.
Yeah.
So here's the path.
Okay.
And this is public. So it's also out there in the Slack space with Team MakeyMakey.
Okay.
And as I understand it, as long as you have access to the cohort, you're able to read and write here, or read here. I don't know if you can write in my project without that, but it's not really
probably branch it or something. I don't know how that exactly works, but
we can learn that. So let me just scroll down. The file structure is right there at the top. Pointing at the screen isn't helping. The file structure is right here at the top.
Yeah.
But if you scroll down, you get the README. And so that gives you a brief overview. The other thing to look at, I'm going to hit open a new tab, is the wiki. In the wiki document, I posted updates for each of these stages. So each stage is then described in some detail. And while that's loading, I'm just going to sort of continue on. But there's an images section for stage 1 and a source code section. So the live code is in the source.
Okay.
In stage 3, that's where I talk about we built the learning record provider.
Yeah.
And I've got a screen saver going there. And in stage 4 and 5, I'm adding in the xAPI wrapper that we talked about in stage 4.
Yeah.
And stage 5 is when we moved to the board. I had to put in some additional logic to handle the joystick and some of the other buttons. Yeah. So it is actually where we added this expander board in. But each of those stages should have some detail. You can see their source files there, their source files there.
Yeah.
And if I go into this wiki page, this is sort of what I'm getting at is so for stage 1, let me stop there. Testing the software, you can download the app that I've compiled.
Okay.
And I'm sort of walking people through that who aren't familiar with live code.
Yeah.
But then you can see further on, I'm referring to some of the other projects from MakeyMakey and how we sort of got started. And then I talk through what we added in at stage 3.
Okay.
But I can see I need to, ideally I'd actually have a link down here to take you back to that GitHub, because Right now you need to say, okay, stage 3 is what I think I want. I need to go back to this page and go into the source for stage 3.
Okay. You mentioned live code 6.7, but you're using 9.6, right? Or
So I built everything within live code commercial 9.5 or 9.6.
okay. Yeah, because you
I
get a better
validated that it would open in the latest version of live code open source. I'm blanking on what they call it.
Yeah, it's still called 9.6, but they
Right.
call it, yeah.
But my understanding was it was an earlier version that is the latest release for live code open.
Okay.
So like I said, you're more keen on the live code stuff than most people, so I'm validating that version will work within the live code open because I don't expect most of them to have a commercial license.
No.
And at that point, with using the JavaScript libraries in the browser, everything is still available to the open version. That's why I have both of them. I think I have multiples down here at the university and Indy. Actually, the other machine I've been working on in the background here has even more live codes. So
Yeah.
I have business, Indian community. There it is, community.
Community, that's what they call it.
And it's 951. Yep. So
yeah, the one thing that 9 point something, or maybe even before that, was that they added the new internet library.
right.
So it might handle some of this better than the old like 6.7, or have some other features. So
Right. So yeah, I've actually looked at that and said, well, if I move forward to the point of where I'm building a closed app and I want to use only commercial, then I would be able to use those tools.
yeah,
So I'm sort of keeping that in the back of my mind for future work. But while I'm working within the xAPI cohort, I want to make it open source so I can upload it to GitHub and have people share it.
yeah,
But the challenge is as I understand it, once I start using those other tools within the commercial, that version becomes dependent on it, unless I try and keep the logic to look at what version is being used.
yeah. I think it's the new URL library is for community too, but I'll check on that
Okay.
just to make sure. Yeah, I've got the commercial license as well, so you get used to what all of this and assume everyone else has
Right.
it. So.
Right. And I haven't really released anything commercially, but I'm sort of working towards it. And this has been my most active live code project, I have to admit. I've done some visualization. I did one when I worked at a local tire chain called Bell Tire, where they had this sort of obtuse structure for their sales force and reaching down to the stores. So we had multiple Word documents that were showing that. And what I thought early on, what they did is said, okay, this area has this and this area has that. And then what I saw was the later versions of it are really like overlapping. I'm forgetting where my camera is. They're overlapping. So you may have, stores right next to each other, literally a block away, who are reporting to different divisions for some reason.
Yeah.
So one of the things that as a new employee, I said, well, if I could build some kind of visualizer and show it in Google Maps where I knew who was where, and either show the full version and let me click on a store and see what area they're in, or go through the structure and say, I want to talk to this guy, which store is he over? I worked through that. And I built the app and showed it to a few people. And within a month, within a week or two of me prototyping it, showing it off, Google changed their APIs and required you to have a key to use their mapping. And suddenly it all just stopped.
Yeah.
And, so I stopped and I asked them, I said, I've been building this on my own time. At this point, I need to invest in some time to understand the Google API and get keys. Do you want me to pursue it? And they said no. And I said, okay,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna leave it where it was. So
Yeah.
that was fun and it was interesting, but
Yeah.
it was one of those frustrating things of using somebody else's API.
Yeah.
Suddenly I'm locked out. I can't even show what I created because
Yeah.
they decided you need a key to use the free version.
Yeah. No, they used to in Toronto. It was just for an experiment for myself, and I did a thing where the Toronto. I'm in Toronto, so the fire department had a open data thing where it would publish whenever there's a fire call, so you could go to the web page and see, what cross streets there is.
Yeah.
And so I took that and then paired that up with Google Data, and so you could just make up a little or Google Maps, and so you could make little pointers to where things are. So it's like you can make a little app, sort of, where's the fire, and show where, whenever you hear sirens, is it near me? But the city took that down. They don't give the same level of detail. I guess for some reason they felt it was too, I don't know,
too transparent.
too transparent. So that closed that off, and I didn't know that Google changed their API. But I didn't know that until I tried to open it up because I was just curious to see how I'd done something, and nothing worked anymore. So
Yeah.
it's true. If you get dependent on these, then.
Oh, I wanted to ask while I'm thinking about it. Are you also using FileMaker by chance?
I used to use FileMaker. I had a database where I worked. Well, I did contract work they have like about 500 and some videos that they use for their training, and I made a big FileMaker database that just said, things like what classes are this used in, which instructors use it, and there's a 9-month sort of curriculum, and and then also, what's the topic, some keywords, who's the actor, and like who's the people telling stories or portraying some concept. And so it was just basically a big flat file database, and then I converted it over to live code using Scott's, or someone, not Scott, can't remember who it is, but he had a FileMaker to live code program, and so I converted it over, and then with not too much work got it to work in live code.
Okay.
But then the organization I was doing that for, no one would keep it up. I would show it to the staff, say, okay, now just all you have to do is enter when there's 500 videos. I can't look at them all. You know what's on them. You use them in your teaching, but it never got used. So that's another one that I sort of gave up. It still sits there, and if we ever have, right now everything's been closed since March in this program.
Yeah. So what were they teaching?
Interpreting, sign language interpreting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's an internship program, like post-graduation. So it would be with an employer for a year, or 9 months basically. They would be doing an internship, going out in the field, but also having in class parts. But it's the field part because a lot of it's medical, and adds another person to the two people to the appointment, because we would go as supervisors. So, but anyways, I may try and resurrect it another time if this program ever starts up again.
Yeah,
but I would do it differently. I've learned a lot more about databases, and it was a big mess. Yeah. So I would do it differently.
No, I've actually done a lot with FileMaker, and I'm sort of in that mode of, I need to do something. Do I do it here, or do I do it live code or FileMaker? Where do I want to start it? Yeah. And so I'm intrigued if that FileMaker to live code still around?
I probably own it. What's it called? And it converts the layouts and everything. Like it was amazing. And I had video in this thing, and it converted that.
Wow. Yeah, I actually was part of the beta for the LCFM project, thinking that that's what it was going to do for me, and then come to find out that it takes it straight to an app. You have the FileMaker project, and it converts it to an app, and I'm like, but I want to be able to open the live code. Oh, it doesn't do that. Kevin says, oh, it doesn't do that. And it's like, but that's why I bought in on the beta.
Yeah. How come I can't send you something in chat?
I don't know.
I'm typing it, and then I hit return, and nothing goes.
Let's see. I don't see.
Brian. Oh,
There it went.
FM Pro Migrator.
Okay.
And the website seems to still be there.
Oh, so he has, like a
David
service.
Simpson, that's his name, yeah.
Who is it?
David Simpson. He would often be presenting at live code conferences with this. And it's a huge, he's got examples. It really worked well for me. Like, there were a few things I had to do. Don't think it was that expensive.
Okay.
But contact them and you might.
Yeah, I'm having trouble resolving URLs, so my service might be dipping a little bit here. But no, I appreciate that. And if you could share the I think it was a library you mentioned for visualizing.
The tree library?
Yeah.
I'll write that down. I can't remember. I think that's.
While we're in chat, I'll go ahead and throw them in there. But
yeah,
the URLs I have for you are, I mean, my local isn't going to be of any value, but I had it in my notes. But the live server, the Duckworks server, you should be able to see that. And the GitHub, like I showed you, is once you're added as a member to xAPI cohort, I believe you can go in and download.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if you can comment or mark things, but you should be able to download anything I've published up there. And one of the things I've mentioned is I'm working to get all the files updated on GitHub. I may have some later files, so if you are looking at one of the iterations and don't see the source, let me know, and I can put it up there for you.
I found it's actually it's a widget, tree view, but someone else has made one, and I know, and it takes an array. I just quickly read over it, but I know that Trevor.
Oh, so it's part of 9.5. Okay, great.
Yeah. Trevor DeVore has a thing, like an application framework called Lavure.
Yep.
And within Lavure, I think he has a data tree, like a replacement for the data grid, which he basically wrote, I think, originally. Like he wrote the data grid, and then he's got an updated data, and then there's data grid 2, but he's made his own, which I think can do trees as well, or he is something tree.
Okay.
So you have to create the app as a Lavure app, and I've done one sample of that. My main project I have is using GLX application framework, which is also his.
Okay.
And I haven't managed to find the time to convert it to Lavure, but that I think also has a tree viewer.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about using his framework is that you can put it all up on GitHub, because it uses all text files like script, so that you can track the changes as you do it, rather than live code stacks are binaries that you can't see what you've written. But it does script on the stacks.
I think I wound up zipping everything. I mean, if you run into issues with the stacks that you're downloading, let me know.
Yeah.
Because I think I got them up there in a format that is usable, but yeah, it's another step, because you can't just put the .livecode file.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you just can't, like if you change line, one handler or add another handler, a Git Git won't see that because it's inside a binary file. Oh, what did I do? Close chat. I'm trying to select all the chat, but
Yeah.
can you do that? No, you can't. Oh, yes, you can.
So you said you purchased the live code, let's see, migrator?
Yeah, FM Pro Migrator.
Okay. What I'm seeing now, oh, the pricing.
That's some of his other stuff that he sells. Or that you need to buy if he's used. I can't remember. Yeah, it's a little bit complicated how the pricing worked. Sometimes it was based on number of times you do it.
Yeah, what I see is an annual fee.
Yeah, maybe he's changed it, but you could chat with him and find out what the. Oh, there it is. Live code. You had it like a red square there.
Sorry, I'm scrolling too fast.
Yeah,
This
I'll go
conversion.
back to. Yeah, I'm going back to the page myself.
Yeah, it looks like he just popped up.
What?
He popped up in my chat.
Yeah.
Did I lose you, Martin?
No, I'm here. I'm just looking. It seemed there was like a per conversion price, but maybe he's not doing that now. This is my pet peeve for people who don't make a clear link to their pricing on the first page. It's like, I want to know the price before I go too far. I want to know the price.
We'll see if he's there to respond. It might just be a bot that said he's available.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he's very responsive. Like I had a few questions, and he was helpful with it. But at the time, I can't remember what I paid for it, but it was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of it is I don't need 19. I might need 15 or 12. I'm not sure what my baseline would be, but it wouldn't be current.
Yeah.
But I have hundreds of files that I've built in FileMaker.
Oh, really?
That, you know, as I start looking at projects to move them over, a tool like that would be valuable. But if he's going to charge me for how many layouts and how many apps, it's going to be prohibitive, you know.
Yeah.
And like I said, I was thinking that LCFM would do this, and they, you know,
no, it's geared towards something.
It's always a subscription due to the immense amount of development required. Okay.
Yeah, well, I'll let you do that, figure that out with him, what the subscription is. And maybe he has a demo that you can do, try out. Like, I think, how I remembered it, there was definitely a demo I think I tried, and then I did a fee. But no, there's like he said, there's an amazing amount of work he's put into this, and I don't know that he gets his money back on it. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Like it was a fairly complex program in it, like a database, because it would play the video, it'd find the video and play it and do other things. Anyways, I should get going for lunch. My wife probably is wondering what's happened to me in here.
Okay. Well, I didn't mean to keep you. He just popped up.
No. I'm quite interested, and I'm hopefully this will you'll figure this out. But
yeah.
I should get going, and I will send you that stuff that I've written down.
Okay,
And
I appreciate it.
I will download that, and I'll try and I'm not right away this weekend. I'm working on some stuff.
No, I understand. I'm focused elsewhere tomorrow, and Monday or Tuesday would be fine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but I could do some simple things on the live code fairly quickly and just show you some ideas of how you could use that. Okay, so I'll talk to you later, and thanks for the explanation. It's really helpful to partly see how the JavaScript's working and also get a clearer and clearer idea of how the statements and how they're sent and where they go. And
yeah, and if you want to do another session where I showed you, what the LRS looks like and what the data structures look like there, we can do that again too.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
I will let you continue your conversation. I set you off on a new conversation. So.
Yeah, obviously. So thank you again. I appreciate your time.
No problem. Okay. Talk to you later.
Stop share. And wow.